One of the things that I have discovered along the way in my production career is the importance of momentum, like keeping that momentum going. So I developed the 3-click method to solve one of those roadblocks. So what is the 3-click method? Well, it's just a time-saving methodology that if you put into practice will save you gobs, heaps of time, as the Australians say. It'll save you a lot of time, a lot of energy, save you from a lot of headaches. The best way to talk about this, though, is just to show you. Let's take this track, for example. This was a game we played for On the Hook called Dune, where we took this kind of soaring Dune-type voice, very much like the movie, and we had to produce something around it within an hour. So let's say I want a piano in this, and I'm thinking, I know there's a piano I like called Postcard Pianos. It's one of my favorite pianos. I could either try to search for it, or I could go in here and go into the plugins area if I remember the manufacturer, because those are listed by manufacturer. Then I got to remember, did I install the VST or the AU plugin? I got to kind of remember a lot of things and juggle that in my mind. That's a lot of decision fatigue. I just want to play the piano, right? So with a 3-click method, I know that if I go over to virtual instruments right here, 1 click, go to pianos, 2 clicks, I've got soft piano, postcard piano right here. And now when I load it, I don't have to remember how I load it, where it is, what sampler it uses. This happens to use Contact Player. It's going to load Contact Player, it's going to load the software, and it's going to load whatever patch I had saved it as. Now, I was able to do this in Ableton because of what they call an instrument rack. So I put the right instrument, loaded the right plugins in it, including an EQ, by the way. It's always great to have an EQ because you're going to slope off a lot of those low ends on most instruments. And then I saved it as an instrument. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do this in Ableton. But I want you to get the concept down first, so that if you have a different DAW, you understand the concept of what we're trying to do. Just to drive the point home, I found a solution in which I can make my own directory to put my 3-click method in. And it doesn't use the save searches, it doesn't use the color coding, it uses an actual folder structure that I dictate. So when I need a piano, I can come in here and I have 5 pianos to choose from, my go-to pianos, no more than 5, by the way. When I need a guitar, I can grab a guitar here. When I need an electric guitar, when I need some brass, when I need some drums, I've got these at my fingertips. I work out of these 3 folders now all the time. Every now and then I have to go back to a plugin and load it up, but that always requires me to have to remember the manufacturer's name just to find the plugin that I need. It's a lot easier for me to say, oh, I have a brass instrument. I'm going to go into virtual instruments. I'm going to load brass, and I know that this Cinebrass is going to load, and I don't have to remember where it is, the manufacturer. This happens to load in Contact Player. Just a side note, this also works for instruments that you might have to find through the files directory instead of the library. There are some software instruments that don't have the correct license with Native Instruments, and they don't show up in your library area, and you have to go dig for them in the files area, like this little accordion from Sound Iron, or this amazing vocal instrument from Sonokinetic. When you have to open a sampler, go into the files, and dig through a folder structure just to load an instrument, you're going to forget about it. But with this method, we can just save everything as an instrument rack, and then I can drop it into my virtual instruments area. And now I have it available for me really quickly next time I need it. So for the 3-click method to really work, you've got to stay within a few parameters. Number 1, your instruments, plugins, and the things that you're going to launch all have to be accessible within 3 clicks. Number 2, you need to be able to have a customizable folder structure. Not every music producer uses the same instruments. This music producer may use a whole lot of orchestral stuff, and this one may use a lot of hip-hop type instruments. You need to be able to delete folders, add folders, rename folders, so it's got to be customizable. Number 3, when you load a plugin, like a virtual instrument, it needs to be able to load the preset as well that you dictate. Number 4, when you load a preset like a virtual instrument, you want to be able to add a utility plugin that comes with it. You want that to be loaded in conjunction with it, like an EQ or a stereo widener or a gain reduction knob, something like that. Because there's some instruments that you often are always going to use a reverb, or you're always going to use a stereo widener on. You want to be able to just have that available as soon as you launch that plugin. Number 5, setting up the system does not require you to move the installation of that plugin. I made this mistake a long time ago where I thought, when I set up my new computer, I'm going to tell all the plugins to be installed in certain hard drives, and I try to organize the installation process, and it became a nightmare because when you try to update those software and you try to update those plugins, all the updates don't know where you've put things. I've found that if you install your plugins in the place that the manufacturer wants them to go, you will have way less issues. So in the 3-click method, we don't want to ever make copies of those installations or those plugins and put them other places. Number 6, this needs to be scalable easily, meaning it's something that grows as you're growing as well. You'll probably spend a couple hours getting started with this, with the plugins that you know that you use the most, but you probably can't think of everything. And that's okay. While you're working on your next sessions, you'll realize, you know what? I'm always going for that banjo. Let's put that in my 3-click method. So it needs to be really easily scalable when you're ready to add something to that, and you've discovered that you use that certain plugin or effect all the time. Number 7, and this is an important one. No folder can have more than 5 items in it. Preferably 3, but I'll let you have 5. Up to 5 items. So if you have pianos and your 3-click method, you have some pianos, there should only be 5 pianos. If you have stab synths, it should only be 5, no more than that, because otherwise this just becomes another bird's nest of cluster. And you don't want that. You don't want to be intimidated by, tons of options. You want less options. You can always change those instruments later on. You can always go, you know what? I'm going to replace that steel guitar with something a little bit better that I just bought. That's no big deal. But you've got those 5. You want your go-tos, your 5 most go-tos in that folder. If you have less than that, that's fine. If you only have 1 right now, if you only have 1 banjo that's your go-to, just put 1 banjo in there. You don't have to have 5 yet, but no more than 5. Let's walk through another example. Instead of a virtual instrument, let's talk about an effects and a transition. This is one of our games in which we had to take a rubber ball sound and make a track out of it. So here's my rubber ball. And then in the mix. Don't be sad, don't you cry, just let go of your pain. Now what I want to do is this vocal falls off quite a bit. This is a splice vocal, by the way. So giving them credit. But the vocal really gets quieter here. So we're going to just add a compressor just to kind of regulate the volume, right? To regulate the gain a little bit. I know that I have just an easy stock compressor I can just grab. If I go to effects, go to compressors, and I can grab this Ableton one, drag it in. And of course I named it classic knee compressor. It's a classic knee compressor. Maybe turn the attack down a little bit. Don't be sad, don't you cry, just let go of your pain. So now it brought up those last words just a little bit. Now let's look at a transition. Going into this next part here. Let's say I wanted a little bit of a cymbal swell going into that spot. Well, I can go over here to my virtual instruments. I got to get rid of this search over here because that was on. I'm going to go over to my virtual instruments and I'm going to just grab transitions. Now the way this is working is that this swells is an actual session file. So I'm dropping a session file on here. Now notice when I do that, I already have a track loaded up and I can just grab it and move it around. It's a great swell. But if I go into the session view of Ableton, I've got all these different swells in here that I can preview. So I like this one here. It's a nice quick short swell. So we're going to grab that and I'm going to just drop it where I want it. So now I have all those swells. I just have quick access to some of my favorite little swells that I've put in a folder, saved as a session, dropped it into my 3-click method. Now I can hear some of you already saying, why don't you just use the search feature up here? That's what you sound like right now. I'm going to put in compressor, go to all, put in compressor. Look how many compressors I have. I don't even know which ones I actually have a license for. I don't even know where to start. I'm inundated with options. Not a good idea. Well, you can also do a saved search, or you could just color code all your instruments in one folder. You can do that, absolutely, but there's no folder structure over here. and it gets really cumbersome really quickly. Okay, so let's review what we've learned here. We're going to follow this method called the 3-click method, and there's some parameters. I'm not going to read them all out loud again, but they are on the screen. And the purpose of this is to make our life easier with being able to launch any kind of virtual instrument, real instrument insert, effect, transition, whatever, quickly. Those go-to stuff, not everything. You don't want to have a shortcut to every single thing, because then it doesn't matter anymore. You're just looking at the plugins, the sessions, the virtual instruments, the whatever you use 80 or 90% of the time, and we want quick access to it. Hopefully within 3 clicks. Click, click, click. You have an idea, I need a piano, I need a trumpet, boom, 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 I've got that in there, right there. The way I came up with all these parameters was just a lot of trial and error, obviously. And I was watching some YouTube videos on different organizational systems within Ableton, and there's some great ideas like the saved searches and stuff like that. However, because of the lack of folder structure, it just didn't work for me. And it wasn't until I came across a Reddit post where a guy was talking about this little folder structure that it blew my mind, and I realized it kind of solved all these issues for me. Now, I'm going to show people in the next section here how to do this in Ableton. But if you're going to drop off, let me encourage you, if you can figure this out in your DAW, maybe you're in Pro Tools or Fruity Loops or Logic or whatever, if you can figure this out in your DAW and make a little video about it, doesn't have to be really well produced or whatever, or a blog or something like that. If you could comment below in this video, letting people know about it, that would be super appreciative. And if I see it, I'll put it in the show notes of this video and drive traffic to your channel or blog or website or whatever, because I would love to have a solution for every one of the major DAWs on how to do this 3-click method. I think that could be very, very valuable to everyone. If you got something out of this, please consider subscribing to this channel. I love teaching and showing you guys what I've learned. Hit that like button, please. That really helps me out. And if you're in Ableton, stick around. Next, I'm going to show you how to actually set this up in Ableton Live. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a folder structure over here on the left. Now, when you go to add a folder, you can choose where that folder comes from. So when I add a folder down here, you probably have used this to import loops or things like that. You can choose where you want to grab something from. So before we do that, we're going to go over and we're going to create a folder somewhere on our hard drive. Now I have this in my little sample drive. It's just an external hard drive where I keep all my samples and projects and stuff like that. I always have it backed up also to the cloud and to another drive. I always have 2 backups of everything. Anyway, I created a folder. I called it Ableton Quick Link folder. So just create a folder somewhere where you think you'll remember it. And that's it for the Finder. I'm on a Mac, obviously, but it doesn't matter. If you're on a PC, just create a folder somewhere where you'll remember it. Now, go back over, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a folder in that area. So we're going to create Add Folder. You're going to navigate to wherever that is. I'm going to go to my little sample drive. I'm going to go to Studio, Ableton Quick Link folder right here. And we're going to create a folder now. So if I hadn't done this already, I'm going to just say New Example. Okay, whatever. Once you do that and hit Open, you're going to see it added down here. So you want to create one that says Real Instruments, Virtual Instruments, and Effects, something to that degree. Once you've done that, you can create those at any time. You don't really need to have your Finder or Explorer window anymore. You can close that, and we're going to just work in Ableton after that. Let's say I want to put an instrument in here, and maybe it's a pad. And I'm a big Omnisphere user, and I know that's made by Spectrasonics. So I'm going to just grab Omnisphere. We're going to drop it in here, and I want to find a pad that I like. All right, so we're going to go in here. I'm going to find a pad. Here we go. Epic pad. See how that sounds. Okay, cool. It's just an example. That's called Reverse Fat Pad. I'm going to go ahead and just close this. We're going to put Omnisphere in an instrument rack, but the easiest way to do it is just select Omnisphere, hold Command, and hit G, and it'll just add it into an instrument rack. Now I can expand it by clicking this button here, and I can see that I have Omnisphere. So we also want to add an EQ after every single plugin, just about everyone. And we don't have to even enable it. We just want it there in case we ever need it. So I'm going to go to Effects. I'm going to grab my EQ. Here's a bass slope. And I'm going to drop it right here. Now this is already in its own grouping. So we're going to right click this and say ungroup. So we just have that EQ. And now it's inside of here. However you want to get that EQ in there. And you might not even want an Ableton one. You might want a different one. Now I'm going to save the instrument rack. Now don't save the plugin, save the instrument rack. Be sure you click the right save button. And I'm going to call it Bat Pad. And then I like to put a dash and remind myself where it's coming from. So I'll say Omnisphere. Something like that. And I'm going to hit save. Now you're going to notice it's going to be saved automatically in your user library. It just defaults that way. It's not hard to shift it. All you're going to do is take it and move it over to Virtual Instruments. And then now I click Virtual Instruments. It's down here. It's at the bottom. And now I just drop it wherever I want it. So we're going to drop it into synths like this. Or actually pads. We're going to drop it into pads. Okay. So you can see in pads I now have 4. I can have up to 5, but I don't want to have more than 5. But now I've got an earthquake one that's going through decent samples. I've got Beautiful Suspense, which is going through Vocalese, which is actually being launched from Contact. And I've got this fat pad. Anyway, I have different types of pads that I can grab at a quick notice. So that's how to do a virtual instrument. Most of the other things we're doing are kind of the same thing. Let's do another one. We're going to do an effect. Let's say I have a vocal track here. And I want to put an effect on this. Maybe a stereo widener. Okay. Now I love the native or as Isotopes Relay plugin. It's got a quick stereo widener that I think is fantastic. So I'm going to just grab that. I'm going to grab the AU plugin. I try to always use the AU plugins. They seem the most stable and they don't crash as much. So I'm going to grab this relay. We're going to just drop it over here. Now it's outside of this instrument rack. I'm going to actually close this instrument rack down here. Actually, let's just get rid of this compressor so this isn't confusing. So we got our relay, and this is our widener. I'm going to go ahead and widen it like that. And this also has its own little filter. We can put that filter on as well, just in case we ever need it. And it's a high-pass filter at 80 hertz cutoff. So now we're going to add this. We want to add this again to our 3-click method. So we're going to group it. So we put Command G. It groups it into an instrument rack. We're going to just save it and say stereo widener, and I'm going to say isotope and isotope relay. Okay. And again, it defaults it into your user library. We're just going to move it. We're going to grab it and put it into our effects folder because it's an effect. And then we can grab this and drop it into our stereo width. I've already done this, obviously, so I don't really want to do that. But there you go. That's how you add an effect. And if you want to delete it, you can just delete it. And it'll move that to trash. You're not deleting the actual plugin. You're deleting a instrument rack that you created that utilizes the plugin. So remember, you can delete these little ADG files. It's not going to mess things up. Those are just a little instrument rack. One of the only weird situations is when you have a track that you might have a bunch of audio clips on, little loops or stingers or something like that, and you want that to be part of your 3-click method. The best way I can come up with is you save it as a session file. So what I've done is, if you go into my virtual instruments, in fact, I showed you this earlier, I have a transitions area, and these are actually they're actually sessions of Ableton. And I have to open them up like this. I wish it weren't quite like this, but I have to. And then I can drop this and it'll add that track or that entire session. The entire session was just one track. And then I can add it in like that. And then in this track, again, I could hit tab going into the session view. I've got all my different booms and impacts right here. I like that method. I haven't found a better method yet for adding a track into the 3-step method. If you know of a method, another way to do this, to quickly add a track that you have clips on, let me know. but this is the best way I've found. And then lastly, you might want to have real instrument racks. So again, let's say we're creating something for maybe I'm plugging in a microphone to use for my ukulele. Maybe I have settings all set up for that, and I want to bring that in. I could go and find the plugins I want for that. Maybe we use audio effect rack that we like. Maybe it's this tremolo guitar rack. We're going to pull that in, and we're going to maybe add. And let's say we get this how we like, and we think it's good. We're good to go. We're going to input. We're going to monitor using this rack. We're going to do the same thing. You just select all the plugins you're using. You're going to group them together as one audio track. You're going to hit save. I'm going to expand this. Hit save on the instrument rack, not the plugin. Save on the instrument rack. And then we're going to say ukulele. Ukulele. I think that's how you spell it. And then I'm going to say Ableton guitar rack. I'm going to say, because that's what I'm kind of using. That saves it right there in your user profile. We're going to drag that now to real instruments. And then we could make subfolders in here. I don't use a lot of real instruments. Almost everything I do is virtual instruments, so I don't use this very often. But that's a quick way to do it as well. That's it. That's how you do this in Ableton Live. I hope that made sense. Again, you can always go in and rename them. You can delete these instrument racks. You can save new ones. It's very customizable. I think this is the way to go. I'm really happy about this method. I hope you are too. If you got something out of it, please hit the like button, and I'll see you in the next video.